Do you speak crowdlending? Welcome to our podcast covering the crowdlending industry. Our mission is to provide you with all the insights from this market and help you make informed decisions. I'm Gassen, co-founder and CEO of Acredius. We are a crowdlending platform based in Zurich, Switzerland. I'm delighted to host this podcast and hopefully bring value to all our listeners. Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 15 of the Do You Speak Crowdlending podcast. I'm honored today to have Sebastian Harung. Sebastian is the co-founder at Kameo, and Kameo operates a digital marketplace for crowdfunded loans to small businesses and property developers in Scandinavia. Welcome, Sebastian.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Sebastian, I already said a little bit about Kameo, but tell us more about yourself, and maybe also you can touch point a little bit on Kameo's side.
Yeah, my background is I used to work in investment banking in Norway, and then I read about the concept of crowdlending or marketplace lending in The Economist. I read about Funding Circle and the large platforms in the UK, and then I basically decided to quit my job and try to establish this in Scandinavia. I sold my apartment and I rented a small one and invested that in the company. And I was lucky to get a few large investors to join me, including my boss. Mm-hmm. And then we started the company. So I'm the CEO right now. We started the company back in 2014, but it's been a little while to get where we are today. The team is now 31, and we have 3 offices in Copenhagen, Oslo and Stockholm, but right now I guess most of them are working from home.
Yeah, that's true. We are in the middle of this pandemic, so just maybe since you touched point on it, I can give some perspective. We are recording this podcast via Zoom because actually Sebastian is stuck in Iceland because of this pandemic, and we are on the 28th of October 2020. So Sebastian, I mean, when I looked a little bit on your profile, I saw that you were a professional football player in the Norwegian first division. So very interesting background, but any skills you learned back then that you are today applying maybe at Kameo?
I think a lot of skills, or to the degree that I had many skills, but I was a goalkeeper. Uh-huh. And I think when you're a goalkeeper, you know that you're always going to make mistakes. And then, I mean, you have to live with that responsibility that there's no one to watch your back. And you have just to, when you do a mistake, you have to live with it. So I kind of think that was a really good experience. And also that the way you have to be, to stamina and to endure, that things take time, it's tough, you just need to keep going. Like you can have a game, you do a big mistake in the first kick on the ball or the first save and you have a big mistake, but there's still 89 minutes to play and you have to play it. So you kind of learn to live with the mistakes and build your confidence up. And I think I was a young goalkeeper and we had really experienced defenders who had used to play in England, and they were yelling at me for like 90 minutes in the beginning. And after a few months, I was getting more confident and I could start yelling back. So I think I learned to build up confidence over time, I would say. Yeah.
Excellent. Now that's definitely something that can help you, especially with the crowdlending industry, where at this stage, I assume you will tell us more. I assume in Scandinavia, it's not as known as any other asset class. So you probably need hopefully you're not yelling at your clients at this stage.
But the team, of course. Yeah, but it's also, I mean, it's becoming quite competitive. We have a few competitors in all 3 countries. So, and of course, relating to football, you play football because you're a competitive person, I would say. So I bring that, and what I really missed about playing football is the up and down turns. It's like being a rock star or a football player. I mean, sometimes you have the best feeling in the world because you saved the penalty, or the next you have a worst feeling, and it goes up and down. It's like, it's a super thrilling ride. And I guess that's the same. You probably would say the same also, being in a new industry, new concept, starting up a company. Lots of cool stuff and then lots of challenges. It's up and downs.
Yes, definitely. It's definitely part of the game, as we say. So speaking back a little bit to crowdlending and, the similarities you have there is very, very interesting. But maybe in your regions, what are, let's say, the most used or the most popular verticals of crowdlending? Is it consumer? Is it SME, real estate? How is it?
It varies according to the countries. So I would say in Sweden, it's definitely consumer and real estate, not much on the SME side. In Norway and Denmark, there's no consumer loans. I think it's illegal. And then there's more SMEs and to some extent real estate. But I think real estate is, if you look at all three countries together as a region, real estate will be the biggest.
Interesting. Yeah, you were telling me before we start the interview that you have actually 3 different websites because you have 3 different regulations, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, are quite similar countries. The languages are almost the same. Alcohol is much cheaper in Denmark and in Sweden than in Norway. So us from Norway, we need to travel to find cheaper alcohol or cheaper meat and butter. But apart from that, we are quite similar. But in terms of financial regulation, there's quite a different approach. You have, I would say, very generally speaking, the Danish regulator is very tight, but it's open. You can communicate and talk with them. The Swedish regulator is heavy under pressure because of too much to do, so that they don't really have time. And then you have the Norwegian regulator, who is very skeptical about new concepts. So, for example, consumer peer-to-peer or consumer crowdlending, it's illegal in Norway, and I think also in Denmark, or at least there's nobody doing it. And we are not allowed to do marketing of our Danish and Swedish loans in Norway. So we ended up with a solution where we do like one platform for each region. And then when the EU law coming next year or the year after in Norway, then we will have one common web page. And there's another challenge also, and that is that our name, company name, which means to play a cameo role, like a background role. We want the investors and the companies to play the main roles. We don't think the middleman should play the main role. That name is actually and that web page, Kameo.com, is owned by Microsoft. It's a computer game from like 15 years back. So we're trying to buy it, but they don't want to sell it. So maybe it's going to be a huge conflict with Bill Gates and myself, but I think I'm going to lose.
Very interesting. Yeah. Maybe it will give you the opportunity to meet him.
Exactly, and I have some good ideas where he could, spend his he could spend more money, I think, on the fighting the pandemic, which he kind of predicted 10 years ago. But I think he's doing that right now, hopefully.
Very interesting. So how do you do? I mean, maybe tell me more about the lenders in Kameo. So it's also divided in the 3 countries, or how do you?
But we see that we have a lot of cross-border activity. So for now we only have local investors, but we see that around 10 to 20% of a loan is filled. If you do a Swedish loan, then 10 to 20% of that loan is filled by Norwegian and Danish investors. So there's cross-country, but the boring part here is, of course, the currency. So the Danish kroner is linked to the euro, so that's super strong. So the Danish investors, they are behaving like kings on our platform now. They can invest in all and think it's super cheap. But while Norwegians, we have a really weak kroner right now, so they tend to invest a little bit less abroad right now. And the Swedish krona is a little bit over average. So we can see that they invest a little bit in Norway too, but it's primarily local for now, and I think that it's the regulation and it's the currency. The regulation will be solved with the new EU law, and the currency. I mean, we are we have been discussing to introduce hedging products where you can hedge, but it's quite risky, and I'm not sure if we want to have private investors enter into those type of products. But what we have today on the platform is 23,000 private investors, all together. Around half of them are Swedish, and they are investing in average around, I would say, 1,000 euros alone. So it's truly a crowd of really small investors. It's our mission to open up this new product to everybody, and we have some larger family offices or institutions doing larger investments, and then we have some small. For example, we have a Norwegian farmer. He invests 50 euros, and then he FaceTimes us from his tractor, asking if the loan is going okay or not. And we have kind of the whole spectrum of the region, which we really like.
Very, very interesting. Really interesting. Thanks for sharing, Sebastian. So as I already said, so we're now here in Europe, a little bit in the middle of the the start of the second wave of the pandemic. You're end of October 28th. How is this current pandemic, in your opinion, affecting the industry in general, and also maybe in Scandinavia, if you can touch base on that?
Well, again, I'm going to say there's differences. I mean, you probably read about how the Swedish have handled the pandemic. It's been quite like normal, while Norway and Denmark been shut down quite heavily in March, April, which also reflected on the activity on our platform. Denmark and Norway has been quiet during the summer, while Sweden has been okay. So what we've also seen is, I think, two things. One is that the interest among investors been crazy. We have had new record months every month since the pandemic, almost in terms of new investor signing up. I think that it's basically, I think, the stock markets, all the negative news, it's global. I think people are afraid that stock markets are very expensive. It's very, volatile. It changes. If Trump tweets something, it can go up or down. It's quite crazy. While we offer local products, so what we do is, only real estate projects right now, and it's like you can then fund the local project. You know where it is. You can actually see that the houses are being built. You understand the project. It's quite, easy. It's tangible. You can go out there and touch. We have some investors who actually drive past the construction sites to look. I have one. He called me and said it was his 24th time looking at the project, it's really easy to understand compared to the global stock markets, which is going up and down. And then on the other side, on the borrower side, the customers on that side, they have had trouble getting bank financing because banks are being reluctant because of the pandemic. We see that more and more of the loans that we do are larger, and we actually compete with the banks, but we get the deal because they don't really want to wait. They just want to get things done, and it hasn't really. We haven't had any default because of the pandemic. We haven't had any defaults in general, but I mean, it's the project's been going on as normal. Some who has ordered things from China in the construction, it was delayed, of course, in the beginning, but they managed to keep building, kept 2 meters apart on the construction side, used the mask. I mean. Construction has been going on as normal, and people still need housing. I guess you could probably see a shift in the housing markets going forward. I think people want to move outside of downtown Stockholm. They want to live outside, larger house, because you're going to be stuck inside for months. So that's been going good, in Sweden in particular. In Norway and Denmark, like I said, for months it was really quiet. It's been picking up now after summer, and we will see how this second wave will affect us there. But in Sweden, it's business as normal, I would say.
Very interesting. We've been also seeing more or less the same activities here as well in Switzerland, or at least on the creative level. It's more or less like that. So And now, speaking of the asset class in general, you said you have mainly private investors, you said, and you have a couple of institutional investors as well. So when you speak to these lenders, what are the main advantages of this asset class when you speak about them? Say, hey, crowdlending is great because of...
Well, I think, I mean, the ones we speak to, it's the interest rate, it's the return, of course, it's important. I think that will be number one. We have an average per year of 9.5, and people are quite happy about that. So that's number one. I think also that all the loans are backed against property, and they like that, because we've done around 300 loans, and 5 of them have defaulted, but we've sold the underlying assets and claimed back the money. We have one that is currently being paid back, but I think they like that, there's some security if things should go the wrong way. So that's also the feedback we get. And then there's one thing I would also say that the broad crowd really likes, and that's that you have a super low starting point. You can start with 50 euros. So people are really happy that you can start with a small amount. You can increase when you see that it works. You can create a portfolio very easily because you can put small amounts in each, and then you get monthly interest rates on every loan. So people like that. You get, even though if you have invested a small amount, you get something out every month, and it's cool to see that it kind of works and you can reinvest. So I think that's. I could probably talk for 2-3 more hours of other, perks, but I would say that that's the most important things, that the interest rates are, it's good, and the loans are secured.
Interesting, very interesting. So, any advice for a beginner investor who is trying to start with crowdlending in general? What do you think he should look at?
Well, that's a good question. I remember when I was, looking through back in 2014 on the different platforms and speaking to my shareholders, we had this thing where we would put in cash in a different or in all the different platforms, and then we would ask to get the money out the next day to see if that really worked. And I mean, it sounds really absurd, but I remember there were like 2 or 3 platforms we couldn't get.
That's not a good advice. I'm sorry. You have to keep all the platforms here.
I mean, one of the platforms are called TrustBuddy. It was a Swedish platform. It was scandal a few years back. So it's like, I like to say that, but I think it's in terms of bringing some advice. I mean, you should of course be careful, because it's your money. I would say that it's always good to start small and build the portfolio. And I like the idea of, like I do, how I save for my kids. I put a big part in index funds through my bank, really easy going funds, global funds. And then I save also through my platform. And I think it's good to have it. I mean, you shouldn't put, of course, everything in. You should start growing and be careful. And then over time, you could really get a good return. And it works well, in my mind, together with an exposure towards share markets or the fund market, because you have more upside potential there. But with crowdlending, you have a stable return every month, which is really attractive right now, at least.
Very interesting. Sebastian, we have, the last question is always a bit tricky for all our guests. So a lot of my guests tried really to, trick me out of it. But I go straight with you. You need to tell us what's your favorite fruit.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I guess it tells you a lot about the persons that how are you, But I know one fact that I think is a little bit strange is that mango is the most eaten fruit in the world. I would always say, I thought it was apple. My answer is apple. And I mean, apple is perhaps not the best tasting fruit, but I think it's the least risky. And it's a little bit about what we do at Kameo. I think that I would rather have sometimes a mango or an orange, but you have to peel it, lots of work, and sometimes it's destroyed. You're like, this is, waste of time, 5 minutes, horror. But with an apple, you can touch it, you can feel, you kind of know the taste. It's not as big, the upside potential is reduced compared to a mango or an orange. The downside potential is not that. So I would go for an apple, and it's quite good.
Very interesting. You're definitely not the first guest who chooses apple, but you are the first guest to choose apple because it's out of how can I call it? Because you're lazy to do the work. So it's easy,
right.
Not an upside, but I can still manage it.
You need to be efficient and care about your time. It's busy. I have 2 small kids. If I peel an orange and it's horrible, they will be like, Dad, you're the worst dad. What's this?
Agree. Then it's a valid answer, Sebastian.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this very insightful and entertaining exchange. Anything you want to add?
Well, I think it was a good and fun interview, not least. I think if I can, try to say something about the future, if we look past the pandemic, I think that, and I hope that the crowdlending market will be more like one common market in the EU and Switzerland also. But I think that we will see that it will become not an alternative asset class, but more like a main asset class together with, stock markets and bond market and your own apartment and all that. But I also think it will be very common for people in Switzerland to invest in a portfolio of European loans. And I think that would make sense much more than just the local like we do in Kameo now. I think people will be really happy about making index investments all across the European countries. So I hope and I think that will really happen over the next years.
Great, Sebastian. This is a very, very positive and an optimistic view of the future, which I agree with 100%. Thank you very much, Sebastian. And thank you everyone who is listening to us, and see you on the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks again for staying with us until the end. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media so you never miss an episode. Please don't hesitate to send us your questions and comments at acredius.ch. Thank you.